Are we live,
I
Elizabeth?
think we are
Okay.
live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics and Money. Very, very excited to be with you. I know I was in China, Elizabeth. We didn't do live for what, 3 weeks now. So
We did not do a live while you were in China, unfortunately. But for the couple of weeks that you're back, we're going to do lives. But if you guys have not been paying, or if you have not gotten notifications, we've been doing a whole bunch of recorded shows for you guys.
So, and by the way, I take this opportunity to say thank you for helping me out with the videos when I was in China. So I want you to, I give credit where credit is due. So,
well, thank you. You are very welcome.
Yeah. Anyway, we're very excited. We're go ahead, Elizabeth. Go ahead.
This topic should be screamed from the rooftops.
Indeed.
I want to start with that. This topic should be screamed from the rooftops. If people knew ahead of time in the 30s that they were going to outlaw gold and the United States was going to confiscate their gold ahead of time, how would they have prepared differently? If they knew that Nixon was going to pull the US dollar off the gold standard and gold was going to be revalued over and over again, basically, ahead of time, how would you behave differently? This is exactly how I feel about our today's topic, and about the fact that this Russian presidential advisor basically called the United States out on their plan. And quite frankly, we have a whole bunch of evidence to suggest that this is very likely going to happen, to dump the $37 trillion of debt that the United States has into cryptocurrency. And then we will discuss a little bit later how that is then potentially going to be devalued.
Yeah, it's a very, very hot topic. Unfortunately, most Americans have no idea what's going on. The advisor you are talking about, Elizabeth, is Anton Kabiagov. I have a picture of him right here. He's the advisor to Russian president on the economic and financial matter, and he's the one who brought this up to the surface. And basically, it's mind blowing. So we're gonna listen to a clip for what he was saying, and we'll take it from there.
Right now, America is trying to change the rules in the gold and cryptocurrency markets. Remember how much debt they have: $35 trillion. Essentially, these are two alternative segments to the global currency market. Washington's actions in this direction clearly demonstrate one of America's main objectives. They are very eager to solve the problem of declining trust in the dollar. The U.S.
Hold on. Pay really close attention. They're eager to solve the problem of the declining trust in the U.S. dollar. Just hold on to that for a second.
Just as it did in the 1930s and 1970s, will solve its financial problems at the expense of the entire world, driving everyone where? Into the cryptocurrency cloud. Over time, when part of the U.S. national debt is placed in stablecoins, the U.S. will devalue that debt. Once again, in simple terms, right now they have a $35 trillion currency debt. They move it into crypto, into the cloud, devalue it, and start from scratch. This is for those who really love dealing with crypto.
Okay.
Wow. It's mind blowing for him to disclose this about not only the U.S. debt, but how the Trump administration is going about it, and at the expense, as he said, at the expense of the rest of the world. So the rest of the world didn't push us into getting into this massive amount of debt. We created it ourselves. So why should we punish the rest of the world for it? It's a debt we acquired. We have to be responsible enough to pay it off or figure out something else.
Okay, well, so let's dive into the fundamental issues of this, because the first one really is that there is no indication that the United States is even trying to pay off this debt. Okay, so frankly, debt itself has been how debt is how more or less the United States was created. I did a show I did a scripted show that is very, very interesting for you guys. And that is basically how the debt economy is what caused inflation. It's not money printing itself, because Japan also printed money and didn't have hyperinflation the way that the United States has had it. And it's not technically hyperinflation, but if you look at the amount that the dollar has been devalued over time, over the last 100 or so years, it is substantive. So what the United States is not looking at getting rid of the debt in a traditional sense. They're not looking to pay it off. Okay. And you can tell that because we add about $1 trillion in debt to our lovely deficit. We add about $1 trillion about every 100-ish days. So that means we are climbing in debt. And quite frankly, taxpayers are not able to pay off $37 trillion in debt. It's just not possible. So since that's not the case, what is the United States planning to do with it? Because the big problem that we're having right now is that other countries don't want to buy our treasuries. They don't want to buy our debt because we have so much of it compared to GDP, which Ray Dalio has been screaming from the rooftops. This is a really big problem. Countries like China, David, you talk about this all the time. China dumps our treasuries. They are dumping our debt as fast, more or less as fast as they reasonably can. So since people don't want our debt and they're not buying our debt and they're dumping our debt, how is the US going to acquire more and more and more debt? And this is what he's actually talking about.
Yeah, and that's very crucial for at least Americans to really grasp the significance of these developments, because their financial settings are tied to what's going on with the government policies and so forth. We all know how corrupted our government is. We're not going to get into all this. We know how it is. But this act like this, and what this advisor to the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, disclosed, because if we are to hypothetically notice that another country is doing this, you know what we're going to be saying? Oh, that's criminal. Oh, that's against the law. Oh, they are violating the law and so forth. And yet we are planning on doing it. And that is where the concern to me was, like the idea, it's like in your family. Are you going to be living beyond your means? I don't think so.
Well, so the United States, okay, so let's go back to two things that he actually said during his speech, because he said a couple of things that were really critical. The first one we just addressed, which is trust. The other countries fundamentally don't have trust in the US anymore. They don't trust the treasuries. Quite frankly, I don't know that the US is going to flat out default, but the higher and higher the debt goes, the more expensive it is to service that debt. So right now we have a massive amount of our tax revenue that is coming in to just service debt. That means that's money that doesn't go to roads. It doesn't go to infrastructure. It doesn't go to education. It doesn't go to teaching the next generation. So that's money that the United States can't even spend on military. They can't spend it on anything that they want to, because they have to service debt. So what's happened is that the higher the debt goes, the greater the yields they have to offer, which is interest that they have to offer. But that also means that's more interest they have to pay, making that debt burden even higher because of how much interest has to be paid back. Okay. Other countries, for a whole bunch of reasons, that is a reason. And then, David, you said it a couple years ago when the Ukraine conflict started, when Biden tried or seized Russian assets. The rest of the world was like, okay, well, I guess if you don't like us for some reason, you can seize our assets and then spend them for the other side. So the entire world saw that. And
that's, no, you're right. And that's exactly where, for example, where Europe is headed. You know, with this so-called decoupling from the Russian energy, you know what is going to leave Europe with? Massive amount of cost for energy. And guess where they get in that from? The United States. So we charging them 5, 6, 7 times the prices of what they were getting from the Russians. So you're absolutely correct in this point. The idea is that when you think about all these changes that's taking place, it's not happening also in a vacuum. As we said, there are three other events that really coordinates with exactly what is happening as we speak about this particular topic. One of them has to do with the price of gold. When you consider gold, and I kept some pictures here. When you consider the price of gold, just the last 48 hours, it just went up by about almost 1.1%, which is usually, yes, it might be small margin of increase, but it's still substantive. You're looking at about getting closer to a $4,000 an ounce. And there are those who said few months ago, and I read some analysis by some financial analysts. That's all they do, the financial aspect. They were also speculating that the possibility of it reaching about $5,000 before the end of the year, meaning 2025, is a possibility. And this is exactly what you see where this is headed, where things are headed, and why all of a sudden the advisor to the Russian president decided to disclose this information. For us consumers, is worrisome. It's very worrisome when you start to realize the trust in the dollar it's going even faster. It's going down, and most countries have no interest in trusting the dollar anymore.
Well, as you talk about gold, I would like to show two things.
Yeah.
And that is, let me show the first one. This right here, let me share the tab. And David, tell me if you know what this is.
Oh, under executive order of the president. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. So for those of you guys who don't know this, in the United States in the 1930s, the U.S. government confiscated people's gold. The average person. It now became illegal. You could be jailed. You could be fined for keeping gold. The only gold that was safe was gold that was in coin form, which now, if you see, there are a lot of gold coins. Most people own gold in the form of coins. And that is a direct throwback to what happened here. So under the executive order of the president, this was done. So the average person was holding their wealth in gold, right? Gold has stood the test of time. Gold is a safe asset. Well, according to the US government, it is not your asset to keep if they want it. So in the 1930s, there was a mass rounding up of people's wealth in the form of gold. Okay, so number one. The second thing that I want to show is this right here. Tell me, guys, if you know what this is.
The dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Okay, so that right there is Richard Nixon taking us off the gold standard. Okay, so but what does that mean? Why was that important? It's important in both of these two cases because the US government proved not only to its people that it could not that they could not be trusted with gold. And then when Richard Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, all of the countries that had gold in reserve status, all of a sudden it was no longer pegged, or their dollars were no longer pegged to gold, which means they also were screwed on the back end of that. It wasn't just the average American that could no longer go and turn in their dollars for gold. It was other countries that held dollars as reserves. And so these are two cases in which the trust level, and the other part of that is the gold revaluation. So there are two things I really want to talk about with this, because there's the gold revaluation, but the gold revaluation is important because of the way that this stable coin situation is playing out. Because you could sit there and say, oh, you know, what is his name? Anton Kobiakov. Oh, you know, he is just, you know, trying to slander the United States, whatever. But yes, this lovely gentleman here. I don't know whether he's lovely or not. I've never met him. But so how the actual situation would play out, because it's not as simple as the United States being like, okay, I'm going to buy $37 trillion in Bitcoin and then devalue and dump it, right? It's not as easy as that. So what we just had passed, though, is the Genius Act. And the Genius Act it passed in July 18th of this year. It was signed by President Trump, and basically it created payments in stablecoins, and that they must be 100% backed by liquid assets. So either US dollars or US treasuries. Okay. So here's the thing about that.
Interesting.
That is like low-key selling treasuries. That's like selling treasuries in secret, right? Let's say other countries didn't want to buy treasuries. Okay, well, they're buying stable coins that are one-to-one backed by treasuries. That's basically other countries buying treasuries. Okay, right now the stablecoin situation is one-to-one, one treasury, one to the stablecoin, right? Okay, well, what happens when all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of debt, because that's what it is, right? Is other countries are holding these stable coins thinking that there's something really solid when they're backed to treasuries. And as we know, the treasuries keep on growing and growing as the US's hunger for debt gets even more voracious, okay? What happens when it's no longer one-to-one? What happens when the US revalues and it's 0.3 to 1, 0.1 to 1? And all of a sudden, what they thought they were holding in the stable coin, they thought they were holding one-to-one treasuries to stable coin. All of a sudden, that is halved or a quartered. And all of a sudden, that is massively devalued.
What's interesting? Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
no, go ahead.
Okay, so what I was going to say about it.
You're on a roll. You go ahead.
Because I believe this should be shouted from the rooftops. I really believe that if people understood ahead of time that Nixon was going to take the dollar off the gold standard, and then, okay, so here's the next part of it, is revalued gold. So we have revalues of gold throughout US history. Yes. That lovely substance. Okay. So in the 1930s, when the gold was taken away from the people, okay, so this was massive wealth that the people held. It was taken away from the people, and then it was revalued. So let me pull up the numbers for the revalue, because this absolutely insanity. Okay, here it is. So gold, so the official gold price was $20.67 an ounce. Okay. So Franklin Roosevelt was like, nope, sorry guys, all your gold belongs to us. Just kidding. You thought it was yours, but it's not, it's ours. Okay. And in 1934, okay, so 1933 is when President Roosevelt said, hey, all your gold belongs to us except for coins. Sorry. In 1934, okay, in 1934, the Gold Reserve Act officially revalued gold from $20.67 an ounce to $35 an ounce. That is a 69% devaluation of gold against the dollar. And all of a sudden, the government now has all of this gold. Guys, I'm getting real heated because this is really... It really makes me angry, okay? So all of a sudden, all of this wealth was taken away from the American population and then revalued, so it's even more that the government has. It drives me freaking bananas. And David, what is the gold price today?
It's 3,790.
Okay. So in less than 100 years.
They're expecting it to reach about 5,000 by the end of the year. What I was going to say is the clip you played about Nixon, that first sentence, I directed Secretary Treasury Donnelly to, that is the key word, to temporarily
Yeah.
Different.
Don't
Well,
worry, inflation is transitory.
yeah, yeah, the same thing. That's also emphasized the idea of how much you cannot trust the government of what they are doing and what they're saying. So what Trump is moving away with all this, and this brings me back to my other 2 points I was going to talk about. I talked about the gold going up, and I also talk about the dollar going down. And this one has to do with the dollar went down by almost 11% since Donald Trump came to power.
Well,
so in other words, for people now, here's the simple language to that, is that an average family, we need now about 11% increase in their income to make ends meet based on what they used to be. So the value of the dollar is going down as the gold going up, and all this at the same time when Anton Kabiakov disclosed what the intentions of the US is doing. And to understand how corrupted our system, I'm going to share a picture with you guys right here. Tell me, what do you see on the background? You see those two pictures right here. That's Donald Trump, right? That's
Trump card.
Trump card. It shows you how much even the White House is for sale. Trump was always about Trump. It's about enriching himself and his family. So to go at it at this way, by because what it's going to do to an average citizen, the money we have, it will become, it's almost like what happened in Germany back then. They got so much money, but it's useless. It's worthless. It's exactly, if we go that, we live in beyond our means. We're spending this massive amount of money on military bases, on stuff that have nothing to do with the welfare of average citizens. And yet, you want to dump it on the rest of the world? I don't think so.
Well, and exactly what you just said, David, dumping it on the rest of the world. That's the accusation that was made, right? That's the accusation that Kobiakov made, is that more or less the United States is dumping this on the rest of the world. So for people who are saying, oh no, this is never going to happen, this is never going to happen, David, I would like to share this clip because it's basically talking about Scott Bessent talking about doing this exact thing.
I heard that.
So let's listen in.
The U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is positioning the stablecoin industry as a potential solution to the country's mounting debt financing needs. Now, he anticipates that digital currency issuers could become major buyers of the government securities. Now, the U.S. Treasury chief has been in talks with major stablecoin companies, including Tether and Circle, about their treasury holdings. He views the sector as a growing source of demand for short-term government debt. Now, these discussions have influenced the department's strategy to emphasize bill issuance over longer-term security. Stablecoins are pledged to the dollar to maintain dollar peg. The issuers of stablecoins have to hold reserves of safe assets like treasury bills. Currently, the stablecoin market is about $250 billion. Now, Bessent expects.
Okay, so in case you were thinking this was conspiracy and this was just one Russian diplomat saying this, it is not. That's not in fact true.
Yeah, that is
this
true.
This is not conspiracy. This is something that is underway. And David, you're absolutely right. I think the big issue with doing anything other than, now, granted, I don't know what the solution is to $37 trillion in debt. What I can tell you is that, after doing kind of a really deep dive into Japan's deflation versus the US's inflation, I think the fundamental issue actually comes back to the central banks. Because the United States, the reason that we're in the situation that we're in is because everything is financialized, right? When you buy a house, what do? You go get a giant mortgage. A mortgage, and David, you speak French as well. Mort means
the death.
Death, right? You are supposed to keep it until you die. It is something you are supposed to pay until you die. It's a mortgage.
Yeah.
So
mortgage.
This is, you are in debt until you die, paying for the place that you live. And an average mortgage is about 30 years. And if you look at life expectancy, which unfortunately in the United States is going down, is dropping massively, people will primarily be paying on their mortgage for the rest of their life. But that is a financialized thing. Look at cars. What do people do? You go buy a car, or you go get a car loan to be able to afford a car. University. Do you pay for university out of pocket, or do you go get a student loan? And these are massive, massive loans. And so basically everything in an American's life is built around debt. Every major thing that you have. And quite frankly, I mean, having just gotten married, I did not use debt to do it, but having just gotten married, weddings are ridiculously expensive. And what did most people do? They go get a loan. So every major step in a person's life is financialized. It is driven by debt. And so you can't be surprised when basically all of this money printing comes down to the average person to spend, because the central banks are giving it to the lending banks. The lending banks are lending it out, and people are spending it in the real economy. And so inflation is out of control in the real economy. Like, don't talk to me about the freaking government numbers. Don't talk to me about their 2%, their 3%. Don't talk to me about that, because I go grocery shopping, right? I know how expensive a house is. And if you live in the real economy, which all of us do, things are getting more and more expensive because of this kicking the can down the road. And so this is just like a hidden secret way, basically, that's not so secret because Scott Besson is talking about it.
And at the same time, we are giving money to other countries. I'll give the two examples, especially for Israel. We're giving the money, and Israel is using that money for having free healthcare and free education.
Right.
So that's, to me, it's a problematic. We don't have here. So that's why Americans gets always distracted by other issues and there and there, and the government is going into the corruption part of it. So that's, to me, highlighted the much bigger picture, and the much bigger picture, which some at least starting to ask the fundamental questions regarding the viability of the system itself, the efficiency of the system. And I've started to hear conversation with people in the know. An average Joe, average Jane, ain't gonna be worrying about this. I'm not putting down anybody here, but I'm talking about people who are in the know, in understanding how the dynamics work. They start to ask now the question about the system in itself. Is it viable? When they are seeing what's going on in some other countries. And this is one of the reasons why, in the case of, and I will bring up China's conversation, because I'm going to bring something about China and gold in a minute here. But this is why one of the key aspects why you have a recent delegation from Congress went to China. It didn't go in China because Trump asked them. As a matter of fact, Trump butted head with them. He didn't want them to go. The reason we went to China, it's because we are realizing there is no other way but either cooperate, because it's not gonna solve itself, and China holds the cards. And this is one of the key. And speaking of China, I want to bring up the third point about what I talked earlier. One has to do with price of gold. Second one has to do with the US going down. And the third one has to do with China. The banks, the China Central Bank now, sort of what are they doing is they are encouraging other countries to deposit their golds in China. You and I think, did a video way back when we talked about China amassing gold. It is for a reason. I do not, and this, I'll bet on it. Usually I don't bet, but I'll bet on this. I bet China will not, and I'm not saying it to be Mr. Nice, I'm saying it based on facts. I bet you China will not behave like the United States. In other words, if countries deposit their golds, China will not say, oh, it's ours now. It's like what we're doing now to Germany, what we're doing to other countries. UK is doing it to Venezuela and India, because the gold in the central bank in England doesn't belong to England. It belongs to Venezuela and it belongs to India. So The US now, the Germans, they can't do anything about the gold here. Saudis can't do anything about the gold. And I saw it with my own eyes. I saw the amount of the equivalency of $21 billion worth of gold bars in the vault. I went down, I was allowed to go, and I saw. So to me, if China moving into this direction, that's, to me, it's a strategic thinking. That means one thing. They are convinced about that the value of the dollar, it's going to go down. That's the only explanation I have. China has no intentions of controlling the gold from other countries and so forth. No. It's the idea of how this is going to pave the way. Sort of, you think about, yes, will it sort of boost the value of the renminbi on the international stage? Of course it will. So, but at the same time, it's not because it wants to turn its currency into a global reserve currency. China's never had the intentions of that. I asked people in the know. And I was told there is no interest of Chinese government into that.
Well, David, you make a really good point, because quite frankly, there is no question that the dollar is being devalued nonstop. That's not it. That's not even an argument, right? I think as a country, you would have to be absolutely blind to not see that that's happening. Even as an average person, you'd have to be absolutely blind to see that that's not happening. The dollar is, and it has been for a long time. This isn't new. I mean, we were discussing gold a little bit earlier, but this isn't the first time that the United States has devalued the currency. It's been happening for a century, probably more than a century at this point. Because what we're looking at with price of gold, even, and price of assets, what we're looking at is the inflated price of assets, right? So you could buy a house for, $5,000. My dad and I were talking about the first house that he bought. So he bought a house for $15,000. Okay.
Wow.
Now this was in the 70s. But he bought a house way for $15,000. There is no way you can buy a house right now for $15,000. You can't even buy a teardown house. I'm not even sure you could buy a piece of land. I mean, maybe somewhere, okay, maybe out in the middle of nowhere, you can buy a piece of land for $15,000. But you can't even buy a new car for $15,000. You can't buy anything really for $15,000. Okay, but that's not because $15,000 was $15,000 back then was worth approximately, because years and in all of this stuff, but it was approximately worth basically what a house is right now, right? Which I think this is more than, I think, inflation, because I think the average house, I think, is like $400,000. But let's say a starter home is $300,000 in most markets, right? So it's that the dollar was devalued to the extent that now for the same asset, you're paying $300,000, because $15,000 of buying power back then is the same as $300,000 of buying power right now. And so it's not that it's the same $15,000 in terms of purchasing power that we have for $15,000 right now. And a lot of people don't think of it that way, but it is that way. It's that the dollar was so devalued that right now everything is ridiculously expensive. The other side of that coin is that, for example, a house used to be 3 to 5 times annual income, and now it's like 7 to 10 times annual income. So incomes have not risen at the same rate that the devaluation of the dollar has risen, that the cost of assets have risen. And so that is the fundamental problem. That $15,000 that my dad paid for that house is not the same $15,000 we have right now, because it doesn't purchase the same amount of stuff. And as a simple explanation of this, if you have a dollar and the entire world has to, whatever they take, whatever they borrow, let's say a country borrows 10 cents, they have to pay that back, because that's all that there is you have this $1. Okay. But if you are in the United States position, or any country that has reserve currency, you can print another dollar. So
Yeah.
let's say you loan that dollar out, the original dollar, somebody pays it back, but all of a sudden now you have $2. So you have more money that comes into the environment, and
Yeah.
it's not competing for more goods and services. The goods and services are the same. You have the same number of goods and services, but now you have twice the amount of money to pay for it. What's going to happen is all of a sudden there's price competition because there's more money in the system. And so
Yeah.
now you have more money going for the exact same goods and services. So what's going to happen? It's going to, the price of things is going to increase.
Increase. But at least there's one thing you can buy with 15,000.
What?
BYD.
Yes, that's lovely. Unfortunately, we don't have that
BYD.
here
I
in the
looked at
United
the
States.
prices.
So
I looked at the prices in China. $15,000 will buy you a nice, efficient, reliable, technologically advanced BYD. And this is one of the reasons, just for our American audience here, to understand why the US went ahead and put those high walls against the Chinese EVs, because most Americans will buy the Chinese vehicles because they are efficient and affordable.
Oh, yeah.
And affordable.
Unquestionably.
I've seen cars, not to be talking about cars here, but I've seen cars in my last trip, a high-end, cost about 40 grand. So as a matter of fact, yesterday I posted for the community, BYD developed now a car that can challenge Bugatti.
Wow.
Yes, I shared the picture with, that's an EV. That just shows you where things are. So 15,000, you still can buy a BYD. But on a serious note, yeah, you're
not here.
Yeah, unfortunately. So, and just for you, for the community to know, when Elizabeth was 14 years old, she participated in an investment competition here in the state of Texas, and she was ranked the 3rd. So
Thank
just
you.
FYI,
not,
to know.
Not blushing.
Way back. Well, no, it's worth mentioning. So this way people understand, where are you coming from regarding this conversation on the financial aspects of it.
Yeah, my degree is in global business.
Yeah,
and
so
if
now you've been in China, you've been in South Korea, you visited, I wish you could have gone next time. Maybe next time you come with me, I'll ask your husband for permission to come with me to China. So,
well, I'm sure
but China has
wonderful.
changed. China has changed big time. What was the first question I was asked when I got back? Especially because they found out that I was in Beijing. As they said, was the air cleared in Beijing?
Yeah.
It was a blue sky. Looks like the Chinese got on it from a few years ago.
Good.
Cleared it up. It was incredible. It was incredible. So I truly enjoyed it. So
well,
just, go ahead. I was going to say, just to go back to our topic, the idea of why is this important? It is important for at least American audience here. I know for you, even in other parts of the world, you need to be aware of where things are headed. Yeah, it's not fair. It's not right for us to dump our debt on the rest of the world. The rest of the world didn't acquire it. We did. So we'll pay. But on the other hand, even Americans themselves, the like us, we are just average people. It's not like we are these millionaires. We're just average people. We kind of handle the finances differently, slightly than an average citizen here. But they have the right to at least understand what's going on, because at some point, and it's getting there, they're going to end up with nothing. Whatever money they have, it's not worth much. They cannot afford to buy basics. And when you start having people wondering about, just the basics, having a hard time to meet those, to finance those kind of necessities, we all know where this is going to lead to. And apparently where the country is headed with the failed and ill-conceived policies of the current administration, or any administration for that matter. I'm not saying the Democrats are better. No, both two faces of the same coin. They are worse, both of them. So the system, in my opinion, this is why I had some conversation with some people, and they start to really point out the direction, the conversation into the direction of the viability of the system in itself. Is the system failing? And maybe time to start reconsidering.
So, David, I watched a video the other day, and I've brought this video up a couple of times because it's just, it's flat out true, right? The system isn't broken for everyone.
No,
The system is broken disproportionately
Okay.
for the 99%.
that's true.
The people at the top, Elon Musk looks like he's doing just fine. He
Ain't
does
gonna
not
worry
look like he and the rest of the elites, quite frankly, even Donald Trump, they look like they're doing just fine. I think I saw an article. I wonder if I can find it again. But it's basically like the Trumps, I don't know, made like $5 billion off crypto or something like that, right? Guys, if you can find the link to the article, stick it in the chat. But they're doing just fine. So the system is not broken equally across all
No.
demographics of people, right? It's doing great for the people who are in power, who are the ones who put and keep the system in place.
Yeah.
The rest of us have financial literacy is abysmal, and not just in this country, around the world. Financial literacy is abysmal. People don't know anything about money. They don't know how it works. And David, you were talking about this whole stablecoin thing, and you know how it's going to affect the average citizen. I think it was even in that news article they were talking, or the Wion thing. I think that's where it was. But they were talking about how the average U.S. citizen is going to be the one holding the stable coin, right?
Yeah.
So some amount of countries are going to hold them. Although, quite frankly, like you saw this Russian diplomat, he basically was like, guys, don't buy these. Kobiakov was like, this is what's happening. Don't buy these. You're basically buying treasuries. And the U.S. is going to use this to push to sell more debt, right?
Yeah.
It's the average person that's going to be like, oh, it's safe. And I am not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. This is just my opinion, right? It's just an opinion of some random person, some girl in the world, right? But they said it is that it's going to be the average person that holds these. And so it doesn't mean that it's like necessarily a bad investment. I'm sure people are going to, come back and be like, no, stablecoin's like a great investment. I do think it's possible that it is a backdoor as a central bank digital currency, which we did a show on, where we'll do a whole other show basically on how stablecoin really is a central bank digital currency and backdoor to control and all of that stuff. But if you're just looking at it in terms of value, I think there's a real question there.
That's why the Europeans are pushing for it. So let me say thank you quickly here to Rafael. Here's what he wrote. Hello, my beautiful people. She is on fire. She is indeed.
This makes me angry.
Yeah. Rafael, thank you so much for your continued support.
Thank you.
Man. Pay attention to the also Russia and China says Bitcoin is a scam. They will not allow the US to get rid of that way. No way. And that's true. That's correct, Rafael. Why should the US get off the hook per se? Yeah, I'm an American, and I'm, would it be nice not to have the debt? But again, at the same time, we got ourselves into all this mess. We've been getting ourselves into this mess.
Right, but that's not the problem. The problem so yes, that's definitely true. I'm not arguing that that's true. It is, okay? But that's not the problem. The problem is who owns this debt, because it's not just the US's problem. The fact that
there are other countries involved as well. But at the same time, when you look at, for example, we spending, at least to my knowledge, during my days in DC, where we'll have a conversation about the payments of the interest on the debt, and at that time I recall it was about $750 billion.
It's more than that now.
Yeah, I'm sure. And the idea is sort of like a common sense. Well, if you are spending more than you are earning, the common sense to do is you're gonna have to rethink your spending habits. So, and that applies to the government as well. When we go and send money right and left to corrupted governments and expend more military bases around the world, and all that stuff costs money. Where that money is coming from? There's taxpayers that.
It's printing money. I mean, it's taxpayer, but it's like printing money, and it's more debt, right? So I am certain that debt is being used to pay debt at this point.
Till when?
Well, but so
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying is if the US were to default on its debt, which I don't think is going to happen, okay? But
Yeah.
even if the US inflates its debt away, which is an equally bad problem, okay? It's
It is.
just
Big time.
spread over time instead of like if the US defaulted on its debt or any part of its debt, that would be a like, okay, right now this is like a really big problem. But if the US inflates its debt away, which is what it is doing, that is
Yeah.
what is happening. Whether the US is doing it on purpose or not, that is what's happening, okay? And it's being called out across the world that that's what's happening. But the problem is that other countries are tied to this debt. Other countries and a lot of developing nations hold this debt to the extent that they are more or less living on or gaining profit from the interest payments they're receiving off of this debt. A lot of currencies around the world are still tied to the US dollar. And as inflation rises, it becomes a bigger and bigger problem for those countries. And so this isn't just a United States problem. And I think that that's what Kobiakov is talking about. Is
Yeah.
it's at the expense of the rest of the world. So this is a really, really big problem. And that's why it makes me so angry, is because people really need to be paying attention to the way that this debt is being handled. Because it isn't just the United States. It's not just the American people who are going to suffer for it. It is a lot of the rest of the world. So it's why it gets me all fired up, and why I think people should really pay attention to how this is being handled. And my hope actually is, because a lot of other YouTubers have been talking about this, some news sources, whatever, I think it should be screamed from the rooftops that this is a very real possibility. And especially with the Genius Act, especially with that, because you could say, oh no, there's no way, they're not going to do it, whatever. But number one, it makes sense to do. If you're in that position, it makes sense to do this. But then now we have the Genius Act. We have Scott Bessent coming out and more or less saying this. Okay, so fine. But as a population, keep your eyes wide open. I'm not telling you what to do. I don't know what to do. But I'm telling you, pay attention to this so that you can choose whether you want to buy into it or not. And I'm sure that this story will unfold over years and years and years. So just pay attention. Like I said, I don't have any answers, but I do know that the only way to find a solution is to be paying attention, to have your eyes open and be looking at the situation the way that it is, not the way you may want it to be.
And that is one of the, also just while I'm thinking about it, because usually when things happen like this, the government data and stats, usually when the Labor Department will release the job employment numbers, the consumer index numbers, and so forth, the first thing that's going to come to, at least to some of us, is, can we trust those numbers? Can we trust what
no.
It becomes clear. It becomes clear what they're going to be saying as far as the job numbers, the consumer spending, it's going great, the economy is expanding. And when in reality, it doesn't reflect when you go to grocery stores, it doesn't reflect when you see the prices of items where they are. And it's even more harder for people on a fixed income.
Absolutely.
That's to me, I really feel for the elderly, especially those on retirements. You kind of, they can't, you're on a fixed income, and you realize year after year the value of that dollar is going down. What you used to buy the last year, you might not be able to afford it this year. So, and to me, retired people shouldn't be in that position. Shame on our government.
They shouldn't be. But here's the thing, okay? I did, guys, I'm going to put this link in the description. And this is a show I did a deep dive on. Is the US currently in a recession? Like, are we in a recession now? And a lot of the numbers more or less signal that. So if you want to check it out, please check out that video. It's very, very interesting. But number one, David, you're absolutely right. We can't trust the jobs numbers. They have been so unbelievable. It's not even a little bit inflated. They have been like ridiculously out of this world inflated. So number one, you absolutely cannot trust it. But I will tell you this, there is nothing riskier in this country than being poor or being broke or being on a fixed income. I hate that it's that way, because the people that are the most vulnerable
Yeah.
are the ones who are getting it the worst. And I think that's part of what really inspired me to do this channel the way that we've changed it into more of an economics based or finance based, is because there is nothing riskier than being broke here. There is nothing riskier than being poor, because nobody cares. They don't care. The government doesn't care. They don't care if you can't afford groceries. Part of this video that I did is actually on the rise of buy now, pay later. So buy now, pay later, which is companies like Klarna, Afterpay, these aren't being used for luxuries. They're being used for groceries. So that means you can take your grocery bill and you can split it into 4 different payments or 6 different payments if you can't afford your groceries. Now, the problem with that is that 40% of people have paid a payment late. And so they get hit with all kinds of fees. They get hit with interest rate. They get hit with all of these things. So all of a sudden, their $300 grocery bill for their family is now $400 or $500 for the same groceries. But the fact that people in this country are using buy now, pay later for groceries is an extreme sign. And nobody cares, right? The government's not sitting there like, oh, we should do something about grocery bills.
They're corrupted. So, and this is exactly why I had to mention earlier the idea of the system. It's because what it highlights, and again, when I do comparison, I'm doing comparison because of the facts. And I'll go back to China because I was there. I saw, I asked people, when luckily you can translate few things on the phone and communicate with someone who doesn't speak English, or with someone I don't speak his or her language. And they all were kind enough to talk and ask. And I usually ask basic questions, do you have any economic problem? This like, what do you mean? And I was like, can you afford to buy XYZ? They said, yeah, we don't have problem. I said, do you go hungry in a day? He said, no way. And all that, you kind of course, on a basic level, you get with some people well-educated, highly educated, and so forth. You're going to ask at a higher level as far as how do you see the system, And the one thing that I came to conclusion regarding just this basic conversation, I wasn't conducting interviews, it was just a basic conversation, is that when I compare our system to what the Chinese doing, the one thing that is missing for us is the centrality. We don't have a central sort of system that can work on all directions on behalf of everybody. And that is where I see the difference. And that's what brought me back to mention the idea of the system in itself. And some people here in this country are now asking the question.
What question?
The question is our system flawed and broken? We need to reconsider a different approach or a different system. I'm not saying we need to not to adopt the Chinese system, because Chinese system works for the Chinese. But when you look at the result of that central planning per se, which we don't have because we have, a massive corruption inside the government. The results speaks for themselves on both ends. On the other end, you see where the development of infrastructure, you see when everybody's happy walking. I walked around. I lost about 10 pounds just from walking, believe it or not. Because, I'm not going to stay indoor. The whole idea, you go there to learn. And I walk around and I didn't see homeless people. I didn't see addicts in the street, sleeping in the street. Everybody's relaxed, happy, relaxing, moving about their day. No issues there whatsoever. And I ask myself, are their needs being met? And if they are, who's contributing to that and how so? Because that is, to me, the burning question of why can't we have something similar to that?
Well, so this is my opinion. This is the opinion of one girl in the world, okay? But my opinion of that is, first of all, it is beyond disgusting that the United States has people The richest country in the world has 1 in 4 children that don't have food when they go home from school. Okay. It is disgusting and beyond it is beyond hypocritical. Okay. Let me preface it with that. But it doesn't matter who's in power, because this is the case, whether it is Republican or Democrat or whatever. This has just been the system. Okay. That if you go look at a homeless person, right? They're all over the place and they're gaining, there's more and more of them. Okay. They're big tent cities. It's awful. But there have been homeless people as long as I've been alive. Okay. That is ridiculous. But the average person looks at that homeless person and says, I don't want to be that. They look at the poor and say, I don't want to be that. So I'm going to stay in my job. I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm not going to rock the boat too much, because whoever that is that's looking at that person thinks that they could be them. It is a subconscious control mechanism. That is flat out my opinion, is that you can look at somebody you don't want to be, and you will stay in a job you don't like. You will work yourself to death. You will take out loans to not become that. Yeah. So I don't think that there is a better control mechanism, honestly, than keeping the poor in very plain sight. That is my personal opinion on it. Looking at the struggles of people, the government does not care. And I can tell they don't care because of how many people are struggling. If the government cared that people were struggling, they wouldn't be. Yeah. And so flat out, I believe my opinion, one girl in the world, is that it is a flat out control mechanism. The elites are like, all right, if you guys jump out of line, you might become that. And it keeps people keeping themselves in the system. Yeah. Because if we all took a look at the system and we said, you know what, this isn't really the system that I want to live in. I don't want to work myself until I'm 65 years old, live in terrible health for another 10 years maybe, and then die without having ever enjoyed my life. I don't think any of us would have signed up for that. If anybody had said, as you were leaving high school, hey, do you want to do this? Everyone would have said no. But that's what the reality is becoming. That's what the reality is for most people. And you can't keep them in line without having something worse than that right in front of their faces all the time. Yeah. So that's just my theory. Yeah. I'm not I don't know.
Yeah. It's the reality. It's reflected through what's going on, for example, in California. You look at San Francisco now. San Francisco spends about $100 million a year on homelessness.
Why are they still homeless?
And they're still in the streets. So I've seen tents in a massive area. New York is that. Some locations I drive at night sometimes, even when I am here in Texas, in Dallas. You drive certain areas. It's not as bad as it is in California and New York, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be in this country. You know, when I was coming back from China, my flight got delayed and so forth. Anyway, I got to LA. I wasn't supposed to be in LA because I had to get a connecting flight. And I said to myself, you know, the next flight was till about midnight, you know. So I had to almost stay. Luckily, I was lucky. One lady helped me from the American airline counter, and she got me on an earlier flight. So I got there at 3, and I had to wait till 11 p.m. And I said to myself, why don't we have speed train? And if it were one, I'll just hop on one from LA and head it back home.
Yeah.
We don't. I looked at the distance I crossed from Shanghai to Beijing. 4 hours, you know, 349 kilometers an hour. On time. As comfortable as it gets. I even snapped a picture, and I'll share it next time. Snapped a picture of water. I put water on the tray at that speed. The cup didn't move.
No Jurassic Park.
That's how smooth the ride was. And the comfort of it. You know, I didn't go business class. I didn't need to go business class. I didn't go first class. I didn't need to go first class. I went second class like everybody else. And the second class is like an airplane. The comfort of it. And I'm like wondering, you know, how hard was it for us to build something like this, to connect two cities? That makes you wonder why people are so happy, because they are less stressed about, I have to get to the airport, I have to go through security, the gas, the insurance, car insurance, and so forth. I'll hop on a train. The rail system in China, you won't believe it, Elizabeth. I hope you get a chance to go. I know you went back then a few years ago.
Yeah.
Things completely different. And
Well,
they are working now on a train that's going to reach almost 1,000 kilometers an hour. Just think about it. You cross the entire China from the east to the west just by train.
Well, like, look, don't get me wrong here, because please, something in the universe, please give us a speed train here. It's so much easier. I really enjoy speed trains. Please, Auto Lobby, can you just let it happen?
Yeah.
Can you just let us have a speed train? Please give the plebes a speed train.
No.
Okay, but that aside, the United States and China are at very different stages in development. Okay, the United States could have not gone the way of the cycle. The United States could have gone a different direction than every other empire that came before it. Okay, it could have, but it didn't.
Yeah.
It went the way of the British Empire. It went the way of the Dutch, of the French. It went the way of all empires, which is the United States at one point was doing all these exciting things. The United States after World War II was booming, right?
Yeah.
It was a booming economy. It was a place where infrastructure was being built. In fact, a lot of our infrastructure is from back then, right? When all this infrastructure was being built. And it was so exciting. And it was all of the new cool things. And then it went the way of the cycle of empires. And China has a choice. They have a choice as to whether they're going to just keep going up and do it right, or are they too going to go the way of the empire? But I don't think it's fair to put the United States with China at this point, because China is on its way up and the US is on its way down. And so it's not in the same place in its empire cycle. And I wish it freaking was. I wish the US had done a lot of history different. And I wish that right now we had speed trains and we had flying cars and all the things that people were so excited about. There is a freaking Tesla coil on I-35. I think it's on I-35 on the way to Austin, I think, or Houston. And it's just sitting out there in a field, right? We could have had, and it went bankrupt. Well, that's a real thing, guys. Look it up in Texas. I think it's on I-35 somewhere along the highway to Austin. But like, we could have had all the exciting things that people were just over the moon about.
Yeah.
And China is having those things right now because they're on their way up. It's undeniable, whether you like China or don't, or think that China's evil or China is the savior. It doesn't matter. China is on its way up and the US is on its way down.
Yeah.
And so the US has a choice right now. Can we pick this ship back up and go in a good direction, or are we going to go the way of the British Empire? Most people are freaking thrilled the British Empire ended. And quite frankly, the rest of the world, if you are American watching this and don't know this, most of the rest of the world is thrilled that the US empire is ending.
Going down. Yeah. Yeah, we abused it. We abused power beyond.
Well, so did the Brits, though, before us.
Well, that's why the outcome was the outcomes. I mean,
the Romans before us.
Ask anybody outside about the British, they'll tell you, it's not liked. The whole for even the current policies for coming out of the Downing streets, it just, we used to deal with them. I used to work with them back in DC, whatever. I mean, it's kind of like they're cunning. It's just the history repeats itself in a way. So you're right. Most of other people around the world, will be thrilled that the US is down, is because we've caused havoc. We have not had the good intentions of cooperating with the rest of the world for the sake of humanity. For the sake of humanity. I understand about, progress. I understand about succeeding. I understand about benefiting from that. But how about that concept of live and let live? We don't want that. We want everything for us. Hell with the rest. And that's not a way of existing. And that is more and more is becoming evident now that the system flawed, corruption is massive, and only American people can either take a stand, fix it, or we just keep kicking the can down the road. And that's what you are noticing right now by having the brains in America are leaving quietly. People are moving. I'm aware of some really sort of top academicians are moving. I have names, and my dear friend Dr. Fang, that I talked to him about all this. He was in academia and so forth, and the brain drains that is going on in America is unbelievable. The government is staying quiet about it. So, and
well, I mean, of course,
it's the reality of it. I mean, the latest one is this particular gentleman. His name is Sang-Chan Shu. One of the top. Listen to this. One of the top AI guy in the United States. No longer. He just left and got a position at Tsinghua University in Beijing, one of the top in the country. If you only read the history of Mr. Sang, or Dr. Sang, that is, he's in computer science and genius, 20, almost 30 years at UCLA working on developing the AI models and so way before its time right now. And he just made a decision 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago. Said, I'm done. You're seeing that brain drain. Academicians, they are now, I'm aware of even professors right here in the US are reaching out to some Chinese institutions. So because we are seeing where this is going. And, you can either make a decision, you can complain all you want, and complaining ain't going to get you anywhere, or make a decision as to what you want. You want to stay, you stay quiet. You want to make a change, make a change. Simple as that. So, and but again, I go back to my point, and that's my last point here. I go back to the point of the system. I tell you, Elizabeth, I had conversation with people in the know. The questions now centers around the efficiency or lack of the system in itself. Forget about corruption, forget about the failed policies, forget all that. That's part of the problem. The key question they're asking now is the system.
Well, the system has been broken for a long time. It may have, I mean, I know people are really obsessed with the Constitution, but our government flat out has not upheld the Constitution.
No, I used to teach those courses, and when I explained to the students that don't get on high horse by thinking that the founding fathers were this saint. No, the founding fathers were part of the problem because there's the one who set up the system the way it is. Who do you think used to be elected for the Senate? It was the founding fathers who used to be the bankers, the landowners, the farmers, who used the one to pick who's going to become a senator in return for you ensure the policies that are enacted are in my favor. The founding fathers have no. Most Americans are delusional about, the great founding father. No. The system was corrupted from its inception. In the beginning. If we had a system where, for example, you got a president that got in a lie or did something against the law, why wait till he or she finishes the term? No. You put the guy in trial, figure out what was issues, and issue the punishment, whatever that punishment. You got a member of government get involved in corruption and get caught. You don't have to get caught. The facts you're thinking about corruption, you don't wait for 3 or 4 or 5 year investigation. You take the guy, prove, give the guy a fair trial, put the evidence on the table, and conduct the punishment. And you all know what my punishment is. I'm not going to say it. So I won't say it. Because to me, that's how it is. That's how it is. You don't, because now we are in a position where we have to decide. When you have a house that has a lot of cracks, what do? You take it down. and you rebuild. That's where we are.
Well, unfortunately, I think that taking it down and rebuilding part is not pleasant for most empires. Not all, but most empires that it happens to. I think the dismantling is very unpleasant.
Sometimes you have to go through pain to make change. That's the only
Well,
way.
I think even if that is the case, I
Yeah.
think it needs to very much be considered what would we change into. Because like you said, you know, the founding fathers, right? So the United States gained its independence from Great Britain, okay? So in a sense, we made a big decolonialization choice.
Yeah.
Okay. Most countries, right? Their independence, the joke is that a lot of countries' independence day is from Great Britain, right? So the United States also where did we get our independence from, right? We got our independence from a corrupt empire.
Yeah.
Because colonialization was awful.
Oh, it was horrendous.
So, and most countries in the world would agree, but the United States was one of those colonies.
Yeah.
And that gained its own freedom, that gained the opportunity to do things differently than the people who were holding them down, than the system. But what did the founding fathers do? They created this beautiful nation that we live in that during many parts of its history was wonderful. But it set up something that you alluded to because it did a lot right, okay? I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it was terrible. It was not. It did a lot right. But what it did was set up elites in power the same way that we have right now. Because what it was landowners, it was bankers, it was the elites of the population at that time. And yes, it's not kings and queens, bless, but yes, it's not kings and queens, but we do have our own ruling class. And that just comes with wealth instead of a title, which the title of king and queen didn't really hold any power if it didn't have wealth behind it either. So we have a different structure for elites to rule everything. And then and this is my opinion, guys, but this is a psyop that everyone here in the United States, at least from my generation, the millennials on, was get wealthy enough to transcend the problems of society. But when everyone is trying to get wealthy, no one's trying to fix the problems.
They become part of it.
Right. When everyone is trying to get wealthy enough to not have to deal with the problems, no one is fixing them. And so everyone, and you know, it was funny. I've kept this story for years and years, but I was 26 years old and it was my birthday and I walked into a bank. I was like depositing a check or something. And the girl behind the counter, we were talking about like, oh, you know, I can't believe I'm a failure. I'm not a multimillionaire at age 26. Okay. And the girl behind the counter was like, oh my God, me too. She was like, I just turned 24 and I thought I'd be a millionaire by now. And she's working at a teller bank, which is a good job. But neither of us were multimillionaires by the point we thought we would be because everyone was told to go be wealthy. Now, there's nothing wrong with being wealthy. I want you guys to be wealthy. I want you to be wealthy. But the point is that if everyone is trying to get out of the system, no one is dealing with the problems of the system. And you can distract entire generations of people away from the problems of the system that exists because everyone's just trying to jump ship until you get further down the line and realize it's a lot harder to jump ship than you think it's going to be when you're young.
And but on that note, we're gonna leave it at that. So,
David, I'm on a tangent.
I know, but unless you want to keep going, you can.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Hang on. I will do this next time when I'm there. So, yeah, I'll try that one. FYI, remember, join me tonight for my conversation with Robbie Barwick. Here's the link on the chat box, and I look forward to seeing you there. It was an interesting talk. I'm very Glad you were on fire, Elizabeth. That's what you
This
said.
makes me angry.
No, I know what you mean. I know where you're coming from, and
Yeah.
and rightly so. And I think this is why that decision to sort of change the trajectory of the channel into these aspects, so at least we can do something useful to the community about
Yeah.
educating on finance and on the whole big picture, because it's very important to understand all this. Anyway, make sure, guys, to subscribe if you have not done so. Hit the like button and check out the other videos that Elizabeth was talking about, because this is what we're going into that direction. We'll be uploading videos pertaining to your understanding and so forth. So we look forward to seeing you next time. All right, you take care. Bye-bye.